Story 1. It was my junior year of high school, and I had been through a few lockdowns before, usually just drills where we sat quietly in the corner with the lights off, whispering silly jokes to make the time pass. But this one was different. It was the most terrifying experience I had ever had, even though it turned out to be a complete waste of everyone's nerves. I still get chills thinking about it, like my mind refuses to let go of what could have happened. I was in history class, half listening while doodling in my notebook as the teacher talked about World War II. There were about 20 students in the room, some friends, some people I barely knew. The classroom was on the first floor, with big windows looking out toward the parking lot, though the blinds were partly drawn because sunlight was streaming in. Suddenly, the intercom crackled on. It was Mrs. Jenkins, the school receptionist, and the only person who really knew how to work that old system. Her voice was trembling, not calm and routine like during practice drills. "Attention, this is a lockdown. This is not a drill. Lock your doors, turn off lights, and hide immediately." Panic spread instantly. For a moment, everyone froze. Then the room erupted into movement. Students scrambled for cover. Some dove under desks. Others crammed into the small coat closet in the back. Our teacher, Mr. Harlan, rushed to the door, locked it, and switched off the lights. He whispered sharply for everyone to stay quiet and keep out of sight. I was sitting near the middle, so I dropped to the floor and started crawling. My heart was pounding so loudly that it filled my ears. What was happening? Was there someone with a weapon? A bomb threat? We had gone through those safety lessons before, with videos showing kids hiding or running, and they always felt staged until now. I crawled to the front of the classroom, where the teacher's desk stood. It looked solid, a big wooden desk with drawers and space underneath. Mr. Harlan was still across the room, helping others hide behind a tall bookshelf. I slid underneath the desk, pulling my backpack close to me. That was when I noticed the small fridge in the corner, humming softly. Curiosity hit me for no real reason. I opened it just a little. Inside were a few cans of Diet C. Clearly, He always had one with him during lunch. I cannot explain why, but I took one out. Maybe I needed something normal to focus on. I opened it as quietly as I could and took a tiny sip. The cold fizz helped steady my shaking hands. The whole room was silent. Then, through the narrow window on the classroom door, I saw a shadow move past. It was definitely a person, tall and slow. My stomach twisted. The doorknob began to rattle. Someone was trying to open it. They turned it back and forth for what felt like forever, probably half a minute, but it dragged on endlessly. I held my breath, gripping neck and tightly. Was this the intruder? Why were they testing our door? The sound finally stopped, and the shadow drifted away. I let out a quiet breath, but my mind was racing. What if they returned with a key or tried to break the glass? We stayed hidden, the room heavy with silence. I could hear someone softly crying from across the room. Mr. Harlan was on his phone, typing rapidly, maybe sending messages to the office. The air felt heavy and still, like the whole class was waiting for something terrible to happen. I had seen news reports about school shootings, kids my age hiding just like we were, sending final messages to their parents. I pulled out my phone. The screen dimmed completely, and I thought about texting my mom. But what could I possibly say? Love you, just in case? Before I could decide, the school bell rang. The automated one for the end of the day. The sound was so loud and ordinary that it made me jump. Everyone stirred a little, whispering if that meant it was finally over. A few moments later, the intercom came alive again. It was Mrs. Jenkins. The campus is secure. Lockdown is lifted. Resume normal activities. Reliefs spread through the room. People started getting up, stretching, collecting their things. I finished the last of the Diet Pepsi and hid the empty can in my backpack. I did not want Mr. Harlan to notice. I was halfway to the door when the intercom crackled once more. Lockdown initiated. This is not a drill. Hide immediately. What was going on? I dropped back to the floor and slid under a desk, muttering a curse under my breath. Everyone started moving again, even more panicked than before. Why another lockdown so soon? Was the first one a mistake, or had something new happened? We went back into hiding, lights off, door locked, time crawling by painfully slow. Then, just like before, the doorknob began to rattle. Same twisting, same persistence. Mr. Harlan looked terrified this time. He was tapping furiously on his phone, probably messaging his family. The glow from his screen showed his pale face and wide, frightened eyes. Quiet whispers spread through the room. Was it the same person? What if they tried to shoot through the door? Then my phone vibrated. A message from a friend in another classroom. Heard there are cops outside. Stay safe. That only made my stomach twist tighter. Cops? Why? For what reason? The minutes dragged on until, after what felt like forever, the intercom buzzed again. The lockdown was over. We could go home. Slowly, we stood up and filed out, the hallways buzzing with voices as everyone compared what they had seen or heard. Nobody really knew what had happened. I grabbed my bike from the rack and rode home fast, heart still pounding. That night, I could not sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the sound of that door rattling again. The next morning, during homeroom, the principal's voice came over the intercom. He sounded calm, maybe even a little embarrassed. I know yesterday was a frightening experience for everyone. Let me explain what actually happened. I noticed a police car in the parking lot, and as a precaution, I called for a lockdown. I went outside to talk to the officer. He rolled down his window. He was just eating his McDonald's lunch. He said he was looking for a quiet place to stop and eat. There was no emergency. I canceled the lockdown immediately. He paused, then continued. But while we were ending the lockdown, the assistant principal started checking classroom doors to make sure they had been properly locked during the drill. He was the one turning the doorknobs. It was all just a misunderstanding. We are reviewing our procedures to make sure something like this does not happen again. The class broke into laughter and groans. Pointless, right? The police officer was eating a Big Mac while we thought our lives were in danger. The assistant principal was only doing his job, but that shadow and the endless rattling still haunted me. I felt drained, like all the fear had built up and had nowhere to go. After school, I went straight home and slept for hours. Story 2. It happened when I was 16, during my junior year at a small suburban high school. We had gone through countless fire drills and several lockdown practices before. Most of us treated them as short breaks from class, whispering jokes in the dark and waiting for the all clear. But one Thursday afternoon, the lockdown was not a practice. I was sitting in history class when the intercom crackled to life. Lockdown. This is not a drill. Teachers, secure your rooms. Our teacher immediately turned off the lights, locked the door, and motioned for us to gather in the corner. The usual nervous laughter was gone. Everyone's face looked tight with fear. We had heard rumors about possible threats nearby before, but this time felt different. It felt real. After a few tense minutes, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Another teacher whispered that we needed to move farther inside the building, away from the windows that faced the street. That was how 6 of us, a small group of students, ended up in the basement, hiding inside the boiler room. The air smelled of dust and old machinery, and the pipes clicked constantly, as if the building itself was restless. The heavy door shut behind us, and we stood still in the dim light, trying not to make a sound. At first, it felt like the safest place we could be. There were no windows and only one way in or out. But as the minutes turned into hours, the quiet from above started to feel heavy. There were no intercom messages, no signals that the danger had passed. We just waited in the dark. Then we realized we were not alone. From the far corner of the boiler room, where the pipes disappeared into the walls, came a scraping noise, metal sliding across concrete. At first, I thought it was only the building settling. But when someone pointed a phone light in that direction, we saw him. It was Mr. Price, the janitor. He had worked at the school for years, but no one really noticed him much. He kept to himself, cleaning the halls or unlocking doors. But now, standing there in the dim glow, he did not look like the same man. His clothes were filthy, his face streaked with grease, and his eyes wide and strange, as if he had not slept for days. We asked what he was doing down there. He did not answer right away. He only stared, then said quietly, "You should not be here. This is my place." That was the moment we realized something was very wrong. He had been living down there. The school must not have realized it, or maybe they simply ignored it. There was a cot tucked in the corner, stacks of canned food, and boxes of old uniforms piled against the wall. It looked like he had been staying there for a long time. At first, I felt sorry for him. Maybe he had lost his home. Maybe this was the only place he had left. But then something in him changed. He started pacing the room, gripping a heavy wrench in one hand. His voice became sharp, filled with suspicion, accusing us of sneaking in, spying on him, and planning to report him. We tried to calm him down, but he was already lost in paranoia. He slammed the boiler room door shut and twisted a ring of keys on his belt. We were trapped. Every sound after that made me jump. He would vanish into the shadows of the basement, then suddenly reappear, standing too close, the wrench swinging loosely from his hand. He muttered things like, "You are not supposed to be here, and if they find me, it will be because of you." We huddled together, whispering about what to do next. One girl tried texting her mom, but there was barely any signal underground. Another boy pushed against the door, but it would not move. The janitor had locked every exit he knew. The longer we stayed, the more he acted as if we were intruders inside his home. At one point, he slammed the wrench against a pipe, the loud clang echoing through the room and making us all flinch. Steam hissed from the crack, filling the air with heat. He smiled then, clearly enjoying the way we reacted. The real intruder, the one who caused the lockdown in the first place, had already been caught outside hours earlier, but we had no idea. All we knew was that inside the school, we were being cornered by someone who should not have been there either. Then one of the boys noticed a small maintenance hatch behind a pile of boxes. It looked narrow, but it might lead somewhere else. While the janitor mumbled to himself across the room, we quietly moved the boxes aside. One after another, we crawled through the opening. The metal scraped my shoulders as I inched forward, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear anything else. I kept expecting to feel the wrench hit me from behind. When we finally emerged, we found ourselves in a dim storage hallway. From there, we ran upstairs until we reached the gym, where a police officer was talking to a group of teachers. They told us the intruder outside had been caught hours ago and that the school was now secure, safe for everyone except us, who had escaped something far stranger. Later, I overheard staff members saying that Mr. Price had been taken into custody. They said he had been secretly living in the basement for nearly 2 years, entering and leaving through service doors late at night. The school board tried to cover it up, calling it a security concern, but for me, that basement will always be tied to the memory of his wild stare and the sound of that wrench striking the pipes. Whenever I hear about a lockdown drill now, I do not think about outside threats anymore. Story 3. My name is Dylan. I am 30 years old now, but this story took place about 14 years ago when I was in grade 10. I was 16 at the time, in what would turn out to be my final year of high school. Back then, I did not think much about school. It often felt like a pointless routine. something I just wanted to get through as quickly as possible. But one day that year became a memory I would never forget, because it was the first time I ever experienced a real lockdown. My school was a medium-sized one with about 600 students in total. Each grade had roughly 100 students divided among different classes. The building itself was simple, just an average high school with rows of classrooms, a big circular foyer filled with couches for students to hang out, and several wide hallways that all looked the same. It was the kind of place where every day felt repetitive. You went to class, saw the same faces, and nothing unusual ever happened. In the earlier grades, life had seemed easier. In grade 7, we were only 13, not worried about much. By grade 8, people started forming their own friend groups. By grade 9, things got a little better since we had more interesting subjects and better teachers. But grade 10 was when everything changed. Students were older, louder, and more difficult to deal with. The teasing became worse, arguments broke out often, and the teachers were constantly losing their patience. The head teacher, Mr. Stevenson, was a strict man who refused to tolerate any kind of nonsense. I still remember one assembly when he yelled at the entire grade to start acting mature and told the girls to stop all the drama. Nobody dared to laugh when he raised his voice. He was the kind of teacher that no one wanted to cross. I only had a few close friends I could trust, maybe 2 or 3, and I mostly kept to myself. Some classmates were kind and easy to talk to, but others were rude, arrogant, or simply mean. I had already dealt with bullying in primary school, and I was determined not to let it happen again. By that point in life, I had learned to stand up for myself whenever someone tried to push me around. In our classroom, everyone had their own seat. Groups of friends sat together. The polite students usually sat in the front, and I sat by myself on a bench along the wall. My teacher, Mr. Nes, was strict but fair. He was not my favorite, but we never had any real problems. It was just another ordinary day when everything changed. The morning started like any other. By the second period, I was already restless, glancing at the clock and counting down the minutes until lunch. Students were whispering, some were laughing, and a few were daydreaming. The classroom was filled with the usual noise, nothing unusual at all. Then the PA system clicked on with its 3-tone chime. I hardly noticed at first. The principal often made announcements that no one really listened to, but this time his voice sounded different. There was tension in his tone, even though he tried to sound calm. Then I heard the words, "Code Black, lock all doors." My head shot up instantly. I looked at the emergency code list pinned to the wall, and my stomach tightened when I saw that Code Black meant a lockdown. For a second, I thought it might be a mistake, but our school had never practiced a lockdown before. We only did fire drills. Lockdowns were something I had only ever heard about in news reports, not in our quiet little city. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. Mr. Enans rushed to the door and locked it. He taped a sheet of paper over the small window and drew the curtains closed. Teachers in the hallway hurried to lock the foyer doors and cover their own windows as well. Within moments, the entire building went silent. Our classroom, once filled with noise and laughter, became pitch dark and completely still. You could hear the sound of breathing across the room. At first, I managed to stay calm. I told myself it was probably a mistake or a precaution. But as the minutes passed in silence, my nerves started to build. Was there someone dangerous outside? Was something happening inside the school? Were we actually in danger? I sat there in the dark, watching the faint outlines of faces around me. Nobody looked panicked, but everyone's eyes showed the same unease. The longer it continued, the more it started to affect me. The air in the classroom felt thick, almost like it had weight to it. Even the smallest noise made people tense up. I tried to listen carefully for any hint of movement, footsteps, or voices from outside. But there was only stillness and the occasional creak of a chair when someone shifted. I kept scanning the room over and over again. The boys sitting across the room whispered to each other once, breaking the quiet, but their voices irritated me. The girls who normally whispered and laughed during class were now sitting perfectly still. It was strange to see everyone so silent. It felt like the darkness had drained the energy out of the room, leaving only nervous faces. Time seemed to crawl. I could not tell how long we sat there. Maybe 30 minutes, maybe longer. Even though I tried to act calm, my nerves were starting to wear thin. I leaned back against the wall, pretending nothing bothered me, but my thoughts were racing about what'd be happening outside. Then finally, the intercom crackled again. All clear. Those 2 words lifted a huge weight off everyone's shoulders. The lights came back on. Mr. Enens pulled the paper from the window, and the door was unlocked. People began to stretch and whisper, some even laughing nervously. The heavy silence that had filled the room disappeared. When lunchtime arrived, the whole school was buzzing with talk. Rumors spread fast. The word was that a student from our grade had pulled a knife on the principal. Nobody seemed to know exactly why, but everyone was saying the principal was safe. The student, on the other hand, was expelled immediately. Hearing that made me feel a mix of relief and unease. I was glad no one was hurt, but realizing that someone had actually brought a weapon to school was chilling. The rest of the day felt off. Teachers tried to carry on with lessons, but no one was really paying attention. The thought of how quickly things could have turned tragic lingered in everyone's minds. Some students joked about it in the hallways. Others exaggerated what had happened, but I could not stop thinking about that dark, silent classroom and how helpless it felt waiting in the unknown. Looking back now, it still feels surreal how unprepared we all were. We lived in a quiet town where things like that were supposed to happen somewhere else. But that day proved how easily normal life can change without warning. One moment I was watching the clock, waiting for lunch, and the next I was holding my breath in fear. It was the only lockdown I ever experienced in school, yet it stayed with me for years. I can still remember the darkness, the quiet, and the uneasy stillness that filled the room. Even after all this time, that memory remains clear in my mind.